Hmm. Okay, so they're like the musical chords, essentially. And they're different instruments. That's actually kind of interesting. They're a musical archetype. That's pretty cool. But that was a pause. Now we can do section 25. Something one is not born with. So let's get this party continuing. Section 25. We're nearly there. We're creeping in on the end of Olympus proper. Oh boy, oh boy. And Pepe was pretty cool, but what I'm about to tell you took place in the spring when I was 15 years old. Back then I thought the future was bright and full of hope. I was born into an environment far better than most could hope for, with talents far greater than most could dream of. I knew I was destined for great things, and that my purpose was to see them done. I'm going to create something beautiful. I'm going to create something wonderful. It was that ideal, that passion, that made me apply myself to my studies day in and day out. And as a result, this is Krishtaria's story. As a result, you were attempted to be assassinated by your own father. I ended up in this filthy dump. I found myself in a place that would never give rise to ideals or principles of any sort. The pain in my chest made me gasp. I couldn't move my limbs at all, but fortunately, I was still able to treat the wound on my chest. Since I had been chosen to take over the family in lieu of my father, I possessed a magical crest that had been reinforced over 11 generations. It was designed to heal its bearer in the event they suffered an injury, even if they could not do so themselves. But now the crest was no longer functioning. Its mana was stagnant, like the anecdotes from the curse department. I knew I must have been poisoned with an anti-mage toxin, one designed to attack its target's nerves and blood. Enough time had passed for the toxin to work through my body, but my crests and circuits were completely dead. I could no longer counteract the toxin myself. I would require assistance. The situation couldn't have been worse. I was trapped in enemy territory, and what strength I had was fading fast. The only hope I had of surviving was if my grandfather noticed something amiss and sent someone to rescue me. The problem was I had no way of knowing if I would last that long. Awake, awake, awake! Especially with more of my father's assassins looking for me. I felt as though the basement's room was already pungent stench had gotten even worse. The boy was wearing a coat that someone else had clearly thrown away, and his hair hadn't been washed in years. That's tomorrow, J6. That is tomorrow. Today was always going to be 7, because I didn't get off of work until 5. Also, welcome. I thought you weren't going to make it today. He must have carried me to where he lived when he found me crawling through the alley after the attempt on my life. I could only guess he thought he could make money off me based on my clothes and appearance. He. Still alive, alive. Hearing the boy digging through a can full of garbage, I was unable to hide my disgust. I was deeply ashamed by the fact that such a pitiful creature had saved my life. Treasure, treasure. Here, eat. The boy pressed a piece of completely stale, moldy bread up to my mouth, and forced me to eat it, wiping the crumbs off my face with his filthy sleeves. Whatever his intent, his efforts were far from helpful. My wound had closed, but my digestive system was only barely working. Ah, gotcha. Rather than helping me recover my strength, eating barely edible food like that would only upset my stomach and make my condition worse. Good. Eat, eat. But I lacked both the strength to resist and the energy to refuse, so I reluctantly opened my mouth and choked down the rock-hard bread. Once I managed to finish the food he forced upon me, the boy stepped away from my bed with a satisfied smile. He then moved to a corner of the room where he sat down cross-legged and continued his unsettling laugh. Though I was racked with both chest pain and shame about my predicament I found myself in, I realized there was nothing I could do, so I simply lay back and closed my eyes. Attack boost, return field to hand, tribute self to summon other tongue monsters. It does sound like a very strong deck, man. It does indeed. This would all be over in a few hours anyway. My assailant was almost surely a mage, so it would be trivial for them to track me down. It was only a matter of time until they discovered this place and came to finish me off, while I was still incapacitated. Any help that might have been on its way would never get here in time. Excuse me. Not even a god could rescue me from this situation. But my assailant never showed, even after several days had passed. I think I must have spent about 10 days on that hard wooden bed without ever getting up. My body was still paralyzed, but at that point, I must have gotten accustomed to my environment. Slowly but surely, I took stock of my current situation. Here, eat this too. No thanks. Could I have some water instead? The fact that this shed was located under a bridge was one silver lining. Thanks to that, we had access to portable water, even if it wasn't entirely clean. That's better. Say, how long have you been living here? Never mind. Eat. My best guess is the boy had been living here since he lost his guardian several years ago. This shed, his home, must have belonged to his guardian. Even now I do not know if his parents abandoned him, or whether he was an orphan from birth. He had very little in the way of language skills. This was hardly surprising, given that he could not have had a single real conversation with an adult in all of his life. What's your name? Surely you must know that much. I was shocked. I couldn't believe there was a child in the day and age, in a modern city no less, who didn't even know what a name was. Ooh. Poor kid. No, more than that, I wondered how he had managed to stay alive on his own all this time. Scary. Everyone's scary. Hide. Safe here. Always safe. As the boy told me this, he stroked a pendant he wore around his neck. Well, I'll be. Even though I couldn't use magecraft at the time, I could still tell that the boy was holding a mystic code of concealment. What's more, it was an antique of incredible value. A talisman that belonged to a sect of witches who have been living in England's deepest forest since even before the clock tower was founded. Damn! Where'd this kid get that? Now I see, that explains it. No wonder my assailants hadn't been able to find me. Their might have been sting and was rendered almost completely invisible. You're right, that really is a treasure. I couldn't bring myself to ask the boy if his parents had left him the talisman, or if he had discovered it for himself somewhere, but at least now I understood his situation. It was the pendant that had enabled him to carry me here from the alley without being seen. It must have also been what enabled him to safely borrow food from nearby stores. I couldn't make up my mind whether his situation was encouraging or depressing. It was thanks to that pendant that the boy had been able to survive on his own all this time. But it was also thanks to that pendant that he'd never needed to become involved with anyone else. In a very real sense, he had slipped through the cracks of society. So you're, unsure what to say to him, I ended up saying nothing. It's okay. It's pretty treasure. My treasure. The boy gave me a big smile while gently tucking the pendant away, never grasping my true intentions. Even thinking back on it now, it still makes my chest ache. Several more days passed, and I made a number of new discoveries. Always saw you. On bridge. Always I saw. That finally jogged my memory. This boy was the vagrant I'd seen when crossing the bridge. Always saw you. Always. I'll never understand what I must have seemed like to him. No, I'll go further. I should never presume to think I could understand. All I can say is that as far as he was concerned, I was someone he'd seen crossing the bridge, and that was enough for him to help me. The boy may have been ignorant, but he wasn't stupid. In his own way, he understood the current situation, too. For starters, he never once left the room. Some part of him understood that if he went outside, even with the pendant, there was a chance people who attacked me would discover us. So for almost 2 weeks, he fed me using food he had already had on hand. Food. What's wrong? Is there a problem? No. No problem. Safe here. Safe. I see. Well, that's alright then. Even having grown accustomed to this environment, I was beyond exhausted. I still couldn't move my limbs, and my strength was no closer to returning. It was no surprise. The food the boy was giving me had no nutritional value whatsoever. And while his pendant may have kept us safe from my assailants, it also kept us hidden from my allies. Sighed loudly in despair and closed my eyes. As I slept, I dreamed of my body rotting away like a decaying tree until I finally died. The boy left. Wake up. It was the first time the boy had ever woken me up of his own accord. Food. Eat up. Eat up. Have lots. Is that... My voice all but broke in shameless excitement. In his hands, the boy was carrying a basket filled to the brim with bread. And not stale, moldy, leftover bread like he'd been giving me so far. This was bread that had been clearly freshly baked that morning. This is amazing, although it's just bread, huh? Don't misunderstand, I do appreciate this, but if you were going out anyway, it would have been nice if you had gotten some other things, too. Here, food. Eat. I didn't realize until later why the boy had only had stale bread on hand. It was because for the entirety of his life, he had never known any other sort of meal. Wow. I didn't understand that back then, since mine had always been a life of luxury. Unfortunately, there was something else I failed to notice too. Something much, much more important. Very well, don't mind if I do. Yes, this is much easier to eat. It's great. The boy suddenly fell into the bed as if he tripped on a rock, his arms clinging to the top near my pillow. He looked just like a child dozing off at their desk. Are you okay? The boy had always looked so malnourished. Oh no. That I haven't even noted how sunken in his cheeks were now, or the fresh bruises on his body. Oh, he had been living alone all this time. Of course he would never have enough food on hand to feed 2 people over 2 weeks. The only reason he had any at all was because nobody stopped him from taking it, thanks to the pendant. The food he had on hand was enough for one person, only enough for him to survive on his own. And ever since he'd taken me in, he'd not so much as set foot outside. If he knew that if he left with the pendant, this room would no longer be safe. So he left it by my bed to keep me... Oh. In an instant, it was clear as day what he had done to bring me more food. He must have been accosted and beaten over and over. And since he had barely eaten a thing, ever since he took me in, the malnourished child simply could not endure such punishment. Treasure. Safe. Safe. No, he couldn't have. No one would ever do something so absurd, so patently foolish. He may have been ignorant, but he was smart. He would never willingly choose to do this. Still on the bed, the boy looked at my face as I lay there, as though he was gazing at the stars. Pretty. Pretty, pretty. No, hang in there, please. You have to. So pretty. At the time I wasn't overcome with grief or shock or anger. I was just done with my own stupidity. I was completely and utterly fed up with how foolish I had been to only look at the future, without seeing or relating to those I had previously treated as though they didn't exist. Create something beautiful, born to be a king, a chosen genius. What a joke. No. Jokes are at least funny. I had no idea what I'd been talking about. I bragged endlessly about creating beautiful things, blindly trusting that simply calling them beautiful was enough. I never once stopped to think about what it was I considered beautiful. The boy's value hadn't changed. He had wasted his life on something so foolish, so stupid, as saving me. I was from the upper crust, and he was from the bottom of the barrel. That much is clear from what we were each bound to contribute to the world in the years to come. But still, could I do what he did? Could I risk my life solely to keep a perfect stranger from starving? Could I risk my life without receiving anything in return, all for something I felt was beautiful? Why, of course, I can do that. I roused my body from its long slumber, very literally burning my soul for energy. I could feel my magical circuits, a gift I had to all that life, at my point, physically crumble away. Then after paying that steep price, too little too late, I ate every roll the boy had bought me. That's right. If he could do it, then I had to as well. Now that he had shown me what was possible, it was incumbent upon me to pay him back. For what he lacked in propriety, he more than made up for in benevolence. I need to set my sights higher. I need to be stronger than ever. I shamelessly shoved the food in my mouth, silently willing my cells back to life. I had no time for regret or self-pity. No, I had a job to do, and I was determined to see it done. This was an entirely new motivation. I certainly wasn't born with these convictions. If my life had continued as planned, this new ideal would have never even occurred to me. But now, I vowed to dedicate my life to it. To take all the many gifts I was given, gifts that boy could never dream of, and use them to demonstrate the value of human life for as long as my own lasts. So that boy taught him to... That boy that gave his own life technically gave Krishtaria a new life as well. Where he was dedicated to make sure human life achieved its full value, I guess. After taking the full force of Krishtaria Wodame's Sirius light, the foreign god disappeared from this sector of space. Whether she was forced to retreat due to injury, or simply did so reflexively, in response to the unexpected strike, is still unclear. Regardless, her exit meant that Olympus would be spared immediate destruction, and left only the master and his servant behind in the palace. So much for that. In retrospect, I may have set my sights a bit too high. What the hell are you smiling about, you idiot? You look like a kid who just got caught with his hands in the candy jar. The servant knelt down beside their master, despite the insults that continued coming, painfully aware of how he would never walk again, now that the bottom of his body had been obliterated. The master rested what remained of himself on the floor, as it crumbled beneath him and took a look up at the sky. Damn, that serious light was some serious shit. Ophelia's didn't do anything close to that. Well, this is how they were originally supposed to be used. Dr. Marisbury told me that in confidence. He said that if things ever looked truly bleak, I should use mine to save the world. No pressure, right? The master coughed dryly and bitterly as he spoke. His cough sounded like the rattling branches of a dead tree. There was no more sign of melodic spring-like lit that had previously been a fixture of his voice. You don't say, and here I thought all of Chaldea's directors were weak and pathetic. Sounds like this Marisbury punk was a hell of a guy. Never would have guessed. Yes, he was. I always did respect him, but he turned out to be far more capable than me. He may have been an avid scientist, who only cared about his research, but he was also just as dangerous as you'd expect of one of the clock tower's 12 lords to be. The master laughed, acknowledging his defeat. There was no trace of regret in his voice. I must admit, I never would have guessed that you would cooperate so willingly with Chaldea. I was so shocked I spilled my tea when I heard you join their side, just like that. I thought that would have been taken considerably longer. Part of me was even a bit jealous. For a moment, I'd wondered if you'd join anyone who defeated you. Hey, it wasn't just like that, and they never defeated me. This is all because Poseidon messed up. Then what convinced you? I guess it was Chaldea's leader, asking me about you. Said he wanted to know what Krishtari Wadame was like now. Not as a mage, but as a person. I think that was the big reason I helped him out this long. Well, that doesn't sound very worth your while. You've been helping them all this time without anything in return. Who said I didn't get anything out of it? In exchange, I had them tell me a shit ton of stories about you from your clock tower days. Some born champion you turned out to be. Turns out you were nothing but an overly cautious, stubborn-as-hell coward. Guess both the Dioscuri and Ophelia were completely wrong about you all along. The servant laughed joyously. It wasn't laughter meant to mock the ones who had misunderstood the master. It was meant to commend him for keeping up such a perfect front for so long. The master looked up at his servant when he heard the laughter, squinting as if they were too bright to look upon. His eyesight had clouded over, and his breathing was already sharp and shallow. Hey, what about you? You got anything you still want to say? Or something you still want to do? Go on, let me hear it. I'll at least do that much for you. Something I still want to do, huh? And so, one small piece at a time, the master told his servant about his what-ifs. He explained how each cryptor was required to have an accomplishment worthy of overturning their death in order to bring them back to life. So the foreign god created environments, customized subjective worlds. Worlds that would let the dead cryptors achieve such a thing. The master was then shifted to these worlds that might have been, yet never were meant to be. And from there, he and his fellow cryptor undertook a journey to restore humanity. So he did go through all the singularities. Damn, seriously? So you saved the world with them? Only as part of a simulation. They were nothing compared to the real singularities. Kadak and I came to trust each other. Ophelia and I shared a laugh with each other. Akuda and I helped each other. Beryl and I disagreed with each other. Pepe must have saved me dozens of times. Oro may seem frivolous, but he has a strong sense of integrity. I really enjoyed getting to understand them better, getting to know their lives. But all the time the master spent with his teammates was no more than a dream, an illusion that was broken the moment his accomplishment was complete. Now, the only one in this whole world who remembered their trying but important journey was the master himself. And you still treated him like that? What, is your heart made of stone or something? What else could I do? If I told them, they wouldn't know what to make of it. So I just kept it all to myself, like any other dream. More preciously, he locked the experiences away so he would never look at them again, to make sure that regardless of what happened, they would never fade away. Journey to restore humanity, huh? That may not be the best way to put it. But if it were all possible, I really wanted to save the world, with Team A, with everyone in Team A, together. The master truly loved his teammates, not as their leader, but as their friend. They're the same, the servant thought bitterly. This master and Chaldea's master were in the exact same position. As his breathing slows, one last thought flits across the master's mind, like a shooting star in the night sky. How were you thinking, you idiot? You didn't have to try so hard all by yourself. I'm glad to hear you say that, Canis, but you're wrong. I was never all by myself. All humans are trying to do their best. Like how they are. Don't you try and pull that shit with me, Krishna. There's no answer. His soul is already gone. His last words, all humans are trying to do their best. And more often than not, isn't that the truth? More often than not, isn't that the truth? The servant turns towards the sky as though watching a bird fly away, never to return. Mistakes flood the servant's mind. Unquenchable hatred pounds the servant's heart. The servant wasn't about to reject the past or previous actions. The pride this heroic spirit held refused to sully the very nature of the hero. After all, the servant had been the one who laughed at the world of humans, the one who mocked and wreaked havoc upon it. That aspect would never change. The servant was well aware they were a villain who hated humans, despised gods, shunned what was right, and embraced what was wrong. But even so, in spite of all of that, damn it, I'm the idiot. Even if everything about her/him was evil, he remembered what he was meant to protect, even as he regretted failing to do so. Took up her spear of lightning, and the golden bird took flight. Their next actions would not be for their own good glory, but to show that they were indeed the right heroic spirit for their master. And so ends Krishtaria Wodame. I honestly don't know. We got a lot on him. He experienced the singularities with all the cryptors, but he doesn't remark upon daybeds, which is interesting. He lived a life of luxury with only goal to make something good, something beautiful, and he was destined to do it, essentially. He was a privileged upbringing and all that. But then one day, after a failed assassination attempt, his whole life perspective changed just because a hungry child gave their own life to ensure Krishtaria would live. One life at the cost of another. The true benevolence of humanity. The selflessness, one of the most selfless acts to give your life for a complete stranger. He had that boy do it for him, and it opened his eyes and caused him to see the world in a different way, I guess. He wanted to demonstrate the true value of humanity as much as he could for the remainder of his life. And, no idea what would have happened if Team A, or rather the incineration of humanity, never occurred. There's no really telling what happened, but I guess he did always have the greater humanity's best interests in heart. He wanted to get rid of all the petty squabbles and all that such between humans by making us all equal. I'm sure that if he could have accomplished that goal without literally wiping out all of humanity first, he would have done it. But, while he was a villain in the end, I think it's safe to say he wasn't evil. Yeah. I think it's safe to say he was not evil. He's another one that I can definitely say I sympathize with. For sure. But that is another section done. I'm going to take a quick drink here before beginning the next.